everybody. My name's Felicia Rose, and this is the Scars and Stillness podcast. Thanks for coming back for episode 5. Just a quick check-in. I always like to put a trigger warning in all of my episodes because as Scars and Stillness, we talk about trauma and working through it and healing from it and day to day. And trauma is not easy. It's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to work through. So just make sure that when you're tuning in that you're giving yourself kindness and compassion and that you're paying attention to how you're feeling and just make sure that that's the number one priority. Again, everything that we talk about is really important to me. So my computer is on over here with all of my pinpoints and my notes. So at any point in time, if you see me looking over for a second, that's why I'm looking at my notes. Or if you're listening on Spotify, if I pause for a short period of time, it's because I'm just trying to regather myself and stay on track. Okay, let's get started. So last episode, we talked about survivor wisdom, the hard-earned insights of abuse and addiction and loss of self. So today's episode I wanted to talk about is kind of the next step. So the chaos after freedom. So I just want to kind of go back over last week's episode, just kind of about what we talked about. And I did write some notes with that. For starters, after abuse and addiction and loss of self, we have like this, I guess, fear, right? We've been taught from society and our lives and abuse that we need to be quiet, to keep secrets, to make ourselves smaller. And I think that by staying silent, by not speaking our truth, we're actually like defending our abuser in a way. Like we're protecting our abuser by staying silent and we're hurting ourselves. So I know that it's scary to speak up and to tell your truth, but it's really powerful. It's a really powerful thing to do. And I felt like that. I felt like when I posted last week's podcast, I was like, because like people say, there's two sides to every story. There's his side, her side, and the truth. And, I have my truth and that's my reality. And that's just how I feel. But my abuser also has his truth and his reality. So, and he can feel and think however he needs to feel and think. I obviously don't talk to him and we're not on any terms. We're not on good terms. We're not on bad terms. We're just literally not on any terms. I don't live my life with him involved in it. I'm free from that. Thank God. My whole point with that is that it is scary. Once you like publicly talk about what you've been through, of course you have that fear in the back of your mind, like retaliation or, something like you have those past the past traumas that have happened in the past where you're afraid of what might happen because you went public with your story. And I think that that's totally normal, but I'm choosing to stand my ground and this is my story and I'm allowed to tell it and no one's allowed to tell me I'm not. Just like no one's allowed to tell me that I'm crazy, that's not true, and whatever else the case may be. This is my truth and I'm going to tell my story, especially if it helps another person. So kind of moving into that. So, of course, we talked about abuse and addiction and loss of self. Well, when you are able to break away, when you're able to break free from abuse or break free from addiction, you kind of go into this place where there's a little bit of chaos after freedom. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I thought it was kind of weird with my own experience that I went through this like rebellious phase, I guess I'll say, because I had only been in 2 relationships my entire life. I had been with my first love for a prolonged period of time, and then I jumped right into my relationship with my abuser, which I was in for a couple of years, and then out of nowhere, I was free. I was single and I was free and I was a single mom and I had no idea who I was. And I had this like fire in me of rebellion. Like nobody can tell me what to do. I am the captain of my own ship or, whatever the case may be. And I went through this, I guess, wild phase, which I hate that term anyway, wild. But for me, it was. I had never been that type of person, and I think I was still very lost. I still had my lost self, and I was rediscovering my identity and rediscovering who I was, and I was doing my best to cope with the after effects of my abuse and my addiction, and obviously I did it in some really poor choice ways, um, to say the least. And I obviously put myself in positions that I wasn't proud of, and even had done things that was totally outside of my character and not something that I would ever do. But of course, with abuse and addiction comes shame. And even though it's been like 100 years since then, I still find myself having moments where I'm like, I cannot believe I did XYZ, and things like that when I was trying to rediscover who I was. And alongside the freedom rebellious stage comes trading addictions, because we have addictive behavior and we're trading our addictions with our addictive behavior switching. I remember when I was in treatment, because obviously I was getting sober from a hardcore drug, and I was like, I'm not an alcoholic. There's nothing wrong with me drinking. At least I'm not doing X anymore. At least I'm not doing that drug anymore. Apparently that is completely normal when you are an addict to trade addictions. So for me, for an example, I, as mentioned, was in an abusive relationship, but I was also on a hardcore drug. So when I got clean, I felt like that was it. So I kind of went back to who I was before my addiction, which was a partier. We used to drink and party all the time. And so I kind of mixed my trading addiction. So I went from my hardcore drug to alcohol and was partying constantly. We were partying all the time. And then trading my addiction into my rebellious stage, where alcohol and feeling rebellious and free, not a good mix, because I was allowing myself to do things that I wouldn't normally do. And we actually learned about that in treatment, that I even have it noted right here where it says, going from addiction and coping mechanisms to another, from a controlling abusive dynamic to compulsive behaviors like sex, work, alcohol, etc., is a completely normalized behavior, with many studies shown for addicts. And it says, research insight. Clinic sources discuss addiction replacement. Substituting one addiction for another, even if the new addiction appears healthier, still signals underlying healing is needed. And it's the Woodland Recovery Center that I got that clinical information from. Because I had moments where I was like, what is going on? I've never been promiscuous. I've always been modest. I had only been with 2 people my whole life, both in long-term relationships. And when I got free from my abuser, I was kind of like, yeah, I'll do whatever I want. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'll get drunk and do stupid crap, or I'll go sleep with this person if I want to. And that stays with a person. That kind of behavior stays with a person. And it did. It stayed with me because I've never been that type of person. And I feel like every time that I went through my kind of rebellious phase, I was hurting myself. I was hurting myself more, because I'm worthy of love, and I'm worthy of commitment, and I'm just worthy of better things. And I think that I kind of not only went back to alcohol, but I went back to that mentality of not being shit or not being enough. You know what I mean? I had already felt like that before my abuser, and I was always taught that the world wasn't safe. Then to have that abusive relationship, hearing all those things, that spider web of things, just stripping myself down to bone, and then actually believing that, man, I really am useless. Man, I really don't deserve good things, or this is the best that I can do. This is all I have. And in fact, my freedom rebellious stage probably lasted for, I would say, off and on for 3 years, actually. Which is, I thought it was crazy, but turns out with research, it's actually quite normal to go anywhere from 2 to 10 years after being out of that lifestyle to just kind of going buck wild or not really knowing who you are anymore. So you're going through like this identity crisis, which I feel like is what I was going through. And my thing was that without the chaos, without the loudness, without the parties, I realized how completely and utterly hollow I was and completely alone. I remember very shortly after I got free from my abuser, my first love resurfaced, and because he had heard that I had like escaped that situation, and he reached out to me, and we tried to kind of see where things would go. And I remember that like we only hung out for a couple of days, and I obviously had a daughter with my abuser, and I remember the conversation with my first love. It was too painful. It was too painful for him to be with me since I had my daughter, because before I got with my abuser, my first love and we had actually gotten pregnant, and our baby died. Like our baby had passed away in my stomach, and I had to have a DNC to get my baby removed. And we had never worked through that. We had never talked about that. We just kind of kept it moving with life. And I think that being reintroduced to each other after my abuse, and then seeing that I had this little person with me, I think that was just a lot. It was a really heavy weight for him to carry, and it's totally valid. Like, and he had said that. He was like, she's supposed to be our baby, and that just breaks you. That breaks the person, because it is true. Like, our baby is in heaven, and I have this other little one who's equally just as precious, but came from abuse, and sometimes it didn't feel fair. It didn't feel fair that our baby, when we were happy in love, had passed on, and then I had this precious gem of a child in a really horrible situation. But yeah, so things happen for a reason, of course. And as mentioned, I'm spiritual, so I know that my babies are waiting for me in heaven, and I'll get to meet them one day, and that'll be a really cool experience to see my kiddos. And anyways, yeah, so we had actually tried to kind of refuse our love after that, just kind of bond back together, and it just wasn't something that was able to happen, which I think broke me even more, because that was like the one thing I held on to in my abuse, was that I was still so in love with this person that maybe there's a chance for us, and that we can come back together. And at that time, when I was, away from my abuser, that wasn't something that we could do. So I felt like that kind of just slingshotted me into an even worse spiral. So the drinking got worse, the behavior got worse. I was putting myself in not only was I being stupid, but I was putting myself in really, really dangerous situations, and really bad stuff happened to me during that, that course of time. Stuff that I'm a really strong believer that people are allowed to express themselves in any way that they want. You can dress any way that you want. You can act however you want. You can say whatever you want. No means no, period. And that's just, the truth of it. But I still also believe, I'm a huge believer in the fact that most of, if not all of the stuff that was really traumatic that happened to me during those couple of years, or those few years, I feel like I would not have been put in that same situation if alcohol was not involved. If I wasn't clouded by being intoxicated, I feel like I would not have been in so many unsafe situations. You know what I mean? Like, I was getting blacked out drunk almost every single time I was getting drunk, and just creating these really terrible situations for myself. And oh man, even talking about, like, it's just hard. It's hard to remember that, to look back at my life and be like, those were probably some of the darkest years of my life, with addiction and abuse in my mind as well. Like, of course, those were like very, very difficult, challenging years, but The freedom rebellious stage was probably my most shameful. The times of my life that I look back on where I'm just like, ugh, like it just disgusts me to think about that. Um, and obviously, when you get past that and you get sober, like actually sober, you realize like you weren't just hurting yourself. You know what I mean? Like you weren't just hurting yourself in those situations. There are other people that were involved that you were hurting as well. Like I remember I was so adamant back then about like I'm going to be free. I'm not going to be tied down. I'm never going to let another man disrespect me. If anything, I'll disrespect a man. Like I was just so adamant on being my own person. I was a huge like advocate for self. Like justice. I was never going to be mistreated again. I was never going to not have the justice that I deserved. And I kind of became like this angry person. You know what I mean? Like I was just not a nice person. And I knew that one of the people that I was seeing back in the day during that phase, I knew that he was falling for me. And I remember just being so cold and so callous. Like people would joke around when we were all hanging out and partying that like I had became the man of that like relationship, friendship with benefits or whatever we were, because I didn't want attachments. I didn't want relationships. I didn't want labels. I just wanted to have fun. And that's all I wanted to do. And I like looking back on that now, I'm like, man, I probably hurt him. You know, like I probably broke him. And that makes me sad because that person he was a really good person and he didn't deserve to be hurt. And I was brutally honest. I remember that I was brutally honest during this phase where I was like, I don't want love. Love is fake. Love is bullshit. Like, I don't want nothing to do with that. If you want to hang out and if you want to have fun, then cool. If you start getting feelings for me, then you need to go. Like, and I was always very cold and very calloused. And that's just not who I am. Like, I've always been kind of an asshole my whole life. Like, I've always been, you know, full of attitude or, you know, I keep the world like this. I've always been like that. I've always kept the world and people at a distance. And the people who are like, not necessarily pushy, but like just they work really hard to get to me, like get to my, you know, get my attention. They almost earn the friendship. You know what I mean? Like they almost earn the friendship or the relationship. Because I'm not going out of my way to make friendships or relationships or whatever. I was just always kind of like not nice. But during that time of my, you know, my rebellious phase, I wasn't even remotely myself. It was almost like I was looking at myself, like I was watching myself on TV. Like I had all these outer body experiences of like, the inner me was like, what is wrong with you? Get yourself together. This is not okay. Like, this is not something that you want to do. And I did it anyway. You know, I did it anyway. And I remember like waking up the next day, sometimes not even remembering what happened or having like, I always explain it like a broken movie film, like where you can see kind of some distorted pieces of the night before, but you actually have no idea what happened. And then you're waking up with 50 text messages from your friends of like, oh my gosh, can you believe that you did this and this and this and this? And then you just feel like the guilt and the shame and like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with me? I got to stop drinking. I got to stop doing these stupid ass things. And then, you know, it just doesn't stop because as I just mentioned, like the moment things are calm and quiet, like you realize how completely and totally alone you are, completely and totally broken. And it was really hard. It was like I was living two lives because I'm not saying that I was like 7 days a week getting drunk and partying all the time. But it was regular for sure. Like I, of course, was a single mom. My daughter was very little at the time. You know, this was probably when she was 1 to 3 or 1 to barely 4. And I was alone and I was a single mom and I obviously had to work to provide for me and my daughter. And so it's like I had this normal mundane life. Like, you know, I would go to work, take care of my daughter, make food, like watch movies. We would do all these things together. But then the times that I didn't have my daughter, like if my grandma or somebody was watching my daughter for me, we partied, we raged. And that was when I found myself in these stupid ass situations, or just doing terrible things to people, or myself doing terrible things to myself. And, just putting myself in really shameful positions and wishing that never happened, and, stuff like that. You just kind of get stuck in this loop. And, yeah, and then like, as the note says here, like, because I was trying to figure out, like, why is this happen? Like, why does this happen? Like, and like I said, like, you hear about it in treatment, you hear about other people talking about this, how they're like, I'm going crazy, like, I'm going wild. Like, why is this happening to me? Why do I just want to chase chaos? And why do I want to do these bad things to myself? And the things that we learned about in not therapy, sorry, but in treatment, I guess it is a form of therapy, but yeah, one of them is the loss of identity plus sudden freedom equals no internal compass yet. And when I remember when I heard stuff like that, I was like, huh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, because I felt so lost, but then I also felt like this over impulse of freedom that I feel like I didn't even know what to do with it all, besides the fact that, like, I was my own boss. Nobody could tell me what to do. I could stay out as late as I wanted. I could drink as much as I wanted. I could have as much makeup on as I wanted. I could, dress however I wanted. I could sleep with whoever I wanted. And that was the problem. Having that sudden amount of freedom and no guidance with it, I feel like caused a tremendous amount of pain for myself and for my heart and for other people. And then the next thing is numbing the pain and emptiness is familiar. Freedom without grounding can feel overwhelming. You know what I mean? Like, I'll say that again. Numbing the pain / emptiness is familiar. Freedom without grounding can feel overwhelming. And I feel like that's basically how I was the entire time I was going through my rebellious phase. I was completely empty. When the things were quiet and my life was back to mundane, I realized how hollow and empty my life was. Obviously, like, I was happy to be free, and I was happy to have, time with my daughter and building that bond with her. Me and her, we grew up together. Like, she, I had her young and we grew up together. So I don't regret a moment with my daughter. I don't regret our lives at all. She's my rainbow baby. And, yeah, I was obviously happy. I'm not saying that my life sucked and it was miserable. I'm just saying that, like, I obviously was happy with my life with my daughter and the freedom that we had and the safety that I had created for us. But when I was alone, like when my daughter wasn't around and I was in bed and I was trying to sleep at night, I realized, like, I was so broken and so empty and so hollow that it was almost like unbearable to deal with that. And as mentioned in my other episodes, like, I was taught at a really early age that a coping mechanism was self-medicating, which is also a really dangerous territory if you're an addict. You know what I mean? Like, and I had it so, firm in my head that, like, I'm addicted to drugs. I'm not addicted to alcohol. So if I want to drink to fall asleep, or if I want to drink to not think about the love of my life, or, think about how much I'm screwing myself up, I'm going to do that, and that's exactly what I did. I was numbing the pain with alcohol, even though I don't know why everyone always resorts to alcohol to numb the pain. Alcohol does not numb anything. If anything, alcohol amplifies how you're feeling. And none of us ever seem to remember that. We never seem to remember that, like, alcohol is actually going to make it a lot worse, but, whatever. And the next thing on the list about, like, what we learned in treatment was a kind of survivor's ego explosion, which I just talked about. The whole, I'm free now, I'll do everything that I want, everything that I was denied. And that's absolutely what I did. I was told in my abusive relationship what I could wear, if I could wear makeup, how I could have my hair, how I could talk, if I could talk, just everything. Every little area of my life was completely monitored and controlled. So I went wild. I went wild with like it says, the survivor's ego explosion, where I was like, I will do whatever the hell I want to do, and no one's going to tell me I'm not going to do it. I don't care who I hurt. I don't care if I hurt myself. This is my life, and this is what I'm going to do. And it was extremely damaging for me. It was extremely damaging for me and other people. I do have a note on here because everything like I'm talking about, it is intertwined. You know what I mean? Like the rebellious phase and the switching addictions and just all these things are all intertwined. And that's how it was with me. It was completely intertwined. And that, one of the points on here was, well, how long does the phase last? Which we've already kind of talked about. But I do have some notes where it says research doesn't specifically specify a fixed time. It's deeply individual. And as I mentioned, like mine lasted probably from 2014 to like Christmas of 2016. That's probably when like my time period was. So I would say the end or beginning of fall 2014 to like the end of December 2016 was kind of my rebellious phase. It does say that recovery from addiction has well understood vulnerability early on. Relapse risk is highest in the first 90 days and remains elevated for the first 1 to 4 years. It says Psychology Today, studies of recovery from an intimate partner violence shows long-term healing spans years. In one study, survivors who left abuse experienced continuing challenges for 2 to 10 years beyond the loss of abuse. So your personal timeline varies on yourself, really. And as mentioned, mine was, fall of 2014 to winter of 2016. So I was basically in I guess it would be like a 2-year window of rebellion, and it was horrible. It was horrible. And I remember when I had had enough. I remember when I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to be that person. I was tired of partying. I was tired of waking up and not remembering what had happened or hearing stories of the stupid or horrible or embarrassing or dumb things that I did, making terrible decisions, or even being with people that I would never want to be with, or, you know what I mean? Just stupid mistakes that I wish I could always take back that I can't. That's just a part of life. I messed up, I made mistakes, but that doesn't define me. And I think it's important that we all know that. The things that we have done, the mistakes that we have made, in no way, shape, or form defines who we are as people. I was broken. I was broken and I was lost and I was trying to figure out who I was with not correct coping mechanisms. During that time, I needed to be kinder to myself, and it probably would have been a good idea if I would have not had my nose up to therapy, because I think healing and taking time alone and removing those environments from myself, removing alcohol, removing parties, was something that I needed to do early on. That yes, I was free, but in no way, shape, or form was I healed. I was still completely and totally, utterly broken. If not worse. I feel like times I was even worse. I was even more broken after abuse than I was, before abuse or during abuse. I feel like when I was alone, it was completely and totally amplified with trauma and everything that I had been through. And it made it all very, very real. It made it all very real. So yeah, my personal timeline was probably a couple of years, but I remember when I had enough. It was, as mentioned, it was Christmas, 2016, and my abuser, he's something else, let me tell you. So he would always go through phases. So I remember the first year that I was away from him, I had a restraining / stalking order against him because he would taunt me. I was free from him, but not really. You know what I mean? He would taunt me. I remember being in treatment and he would be the he would be the 75 feet away or 150 feet away like he was supposed to, but he would be there taunting me, or like, which was a lot. It was still very scary and a lot to take in. But he would have moments where he would get clean and sober, and he was determined to show me that he had changed his life, that he wanted to co-parent, that he wanted to be involved in his daughter's life, and that always lasted like a speed bump of time, 1 to 3 months at most. And then that was it. Disappear, get back on drugs, get incarcerated, live on the streets, being a drug addict, doing his thing. And each one of those times, I think that there was probably a total of 3 times total where he, during the course of time that we had been after 2014 when I had left him, 3 times since he has done that, where he's been saved and he's been better and he's reached out. And each time he's wanting me, he's wanting to get back together. He's not focused on parenting his child. His main focus is me and like being with me, or, like, it doesn't matter who you're with now because I know it's going to always be you and me in the end. I'm not really sure what that means. And even to this day, that's a little spooky. Like, no, it's not going to be you and me in the end. So, sorry. But yeah, he would, I'm changed and I'm better and I've been clean X, Y, Z. And, one of the times he was living in a, like a drug and alcohol program. He was living in sober living and going to treatment and actually taking the steps to be better. And that was probably one of the more believable times because he was actually in a sober living. He was actually in treatment. He was going to groups. He had a job. I've, as mentioned 1,000 times, I'm spiritual. I've always been spiritual. When I got clean and sober, my relationship with God completely elevated. And it was just that. It turned into a relationship. It wasn't a religion. It was a relationship. That's why when people ask me if I'm religious, the answer is no. I am not religious at all. I'm spiritual because I have a relationship with my faith. I have a relationship with it. It's a very close-knit relationship. And that was always really important to me. My abuser used to be an atheist, and I'm sure he still is, but he would always try to like distort and change my point of view and basically tell me it was wrong to believe that my belief was not okay. And the only okay belief and opinions were his own. And that was one thing that I was always really set in, even when I was an addict and even when the abuse was the worst, was I still had faith. I still believed in God. Nothing you tell me is going to change that. No amount of loss of self-identity is going to change the fact that he is with me and he will always be here. Even when I'm totally screwing up my life, he's right next to me and he's just begging for me to see the light. So that was always one thing I kind of clung to. So in that period of time, it was probably 1.5 years after I had left him, when he was doing all these positive things for his life, was the most believable for me. Because, and then the whole church thing was a shock because he had always been so against it, against God, against church, against all of that, I remember that. I remember trying to co-parent with him, and it quickly shifted from being focused on his daughter to hyper fixating on me. Like, we need to get back together, and I love you. I've always loved you. And, he would always tell me, like, we've never tried a relationship sober. Like, who knows how great we would be if we were sober. No, no thanks. And I remember I would try so hard to not fall for it, not fall for his lies, not fall for all of his stuff, because I used to tell people like his claws were finally removed from me and I could see the light. And I was scared to death that if I listened too much, if I spent too much time with him, he was going to claw me back and then I would never get away. And that's kind of the truth. There was something about him, even to this day, where I feel like I cannot be around him. I don't know what it is about him, but it's almost like it's like he puts a spell on me. It's like he puts a spell on me where I'm like, I'm free thinking and I have my morals and my beliefs and I'm firm in my faith and I have all these things. And then when he's around for a little bit too long, I start finding myself like agreeing with what he's saying and minimizing my own feelings. I'm starting to shrink myself down. I'm starting to get smaller. And I don't like that. I don't like that he has the ability to do that to me. Even after all the years of healing, like he still has the ability to do that to me. So yeah, my whole point was that during this time of like rebellion and switching, my addictions and, trying to figure out who the heck I was in the process of all of that, he was in and out. Like he came back and he was clean and he wanted to have the family life or whatever that we had. And I was determined not to. I didn't want to be back with him. Yes, I would spend time with him when he seemed to be doing good, and I'd let him spend time with his daughter, and then he would, get in my head, and sometimes I believed like the family idea was possible, and then I quickly learned that was a lie, or he would show signs again. We'd hang out for a little bit too long, we'd get a little bit too comfortable with each other, I could feel his claws starting to, dig deep, and then he would show his true, I used to call it his true face, because my abuser is very charming, very alluring, he's like a beautiful man, like very, very, beautiful. But I have literally seen his complete and total face change into something just wicked and dark and scary. And, I used to say that. I used to say, oh, there's his real face. Because then he would show his true self. He would show the abuse and the explosion and his just evil, wicked, mean face and tendencies. And then the survival in me would kick in and be like, what the hell are you doing? Get away from him. Why are you back here? Why are you in this truck with him? Or why, you know what I mean? Why is this situation happening? Run. And I remember I had some pretty negative self-talk at that time in my life. So it was a lot of you stupid bitch. What are you doing? Don't be a dumb bitch. You got away from him once. Most people can't get away from their abusers, for a prolonged period of time. And so then I found myself again in this situation where I'm trying to get away from him, and I'm, it wasn't full blown abuse anymore because I was so determined to not let that happen to me again, but it was still very much on the line of abuse again. Things were getting a little messy, and 2015 is if you talk to my abuser now, he is so adamant that, well, she abused me too. That's what he'll say to people. Well, she abused me too, which is not a lie. In 2015, when he was in and out and, doing good for 5 seconds and then wanted to start drinking with me, which was just a terrible idea, and then things started getting pretty dark pretty fast, that wasn't a lie. I remember situations where he would get explosive and put his hands on me, and I fought back. I got to a point where I was like, you are not going to touch me anymore. I'm going to fight back. And I remember an incident. I had just moved into an apartment. I had just moved into an apartment after, I had struggled with a little time gap of bouncing from families' couches and stuff, trying to, find my way after I had to move in a 12-hour period when I had left him the first time. He was in jail, and I remember the police department had actually told me that me and my daughter got to keep our townhouse and all of our things, and that he was going to have to go somewhere else after he got out of jail. But according to the police, he was threatening my life in jail. He was telling the cops that in the morning when he got out, he was going to come and he was going to, kill me, slit my throat, and do all these things and, kill our daughter. And so I remember the police department knocking on my door. It was midnight. So yeah, it wasn't even 12 hours. He got out. He was supposed to get out, I think at 6 a.m, but he ended up getting released at 4 a.m. So we had no time. And they had told me you gotta go. You cannot stay here. He's gonna hurt you. He's gonna hurt you and your daughter when he gets out. He's been very, very vocal about that. And so of course, when I first left, I literally left my entire life that I had built, everything that I knew, I left with my daughter and a suitcase. That's all I got to take with me. And so it took me a really long time to get on my feet after I had left him. I was bouncing around with, family, living with my gram, and kind of in and out with my mom. As mentioned, mine and my mom's relationship has always been rocky. So that wasn't somewhere that was stable for a long period of time. It was somewhere where I could kind of crash for a weekend or something like that before it just wasn't a good fit anymore. So I had to leave. But Yeah. So like a year or a year and a half later, I finally got my own apartment. I had saved up enough money and finally got my own apartment. And he was there, he was there. He was helping me move into my apartment, which was like, oh, looking back on it, I'm like, dude, such a stupid, stupid mistake that I made. But it's life and we make those. But yeah, and we had like a mutual friend with us that was helping us like unpack and stuff. And then I don't even remember what set him off. We had been drinking, obviously, and I don't remember what had set him off, but I think it was like I was in a relationship at the time. I was with a guy who was a total piece of crap, like just a total piece of crap person, and I knew it. I knew he was a terrible guy. Like I knew he was cheating on me. I knew he was probably using drugs behind my back. Like I knew that, and yet I still was in a relationship with him because I was being a dumbass and I was in a rebellious stage and I was like, whatever, I don't even care. Fills the void a little, which he didn't at all. And whatever, that's a totally different story. But yeah, I think that my abuser was mad that I was in a relationship and my partner at that time was like blowing my phone up because he was uncomfortable with the fact that my abuser was there helping me move, which who wouldn't be? And it started a full-blown fight. And I remember like he was getting loud and he started throwing things and then he hit me. And I remember I hit him back. Like that's the first time ever I ever put my hands on him. I hit him back a couple of times and then it was just boom, like it's on. Just a full-blown fight between me and him. The mutual friend was scared to death of what was happening, called the cops. So the cops showed up, first day in my new apartment, late at night, always. Abuse always happens late at night or super early in the morning for some wonderful reason. But yeah, the cops showed up with my landlord on my first day in my house, and my abuser was refusing to tell them his name, and I was done. I was like, we were all like bloody and gross, and I told the police his name, and like he has like a laundry list of history with me, and they had asked me if I wanted to trespass him, and I said, yeah, get him out of here. Like that was a mistake. Get him out of here. And I actually thought that I was going to be arrested. Because we both of us assaulted each other. And I wasn't, by the grace of God. Literally, I was not arrested for that. But that was a huge eye opener for me. And during that course of time, we had hung out like before that situation had happened. We had hung out again, probably for a month or two, like before that had happened, like the big bang happened. And he had showed signs before, of things that he used to do to me that drove me crazy or that was really scary. Like for an example, he would always want to drive and it was always my vehicle, but he would always want to drive. And I remember back in the day during that time, I had this really nice, lifted green Jeep, and me and my daughter, we used to call it Ivy. It was our cool truck or whatever. And yeah, he always wanted to drive my vehicles, and it was before I had obviously gotten a place, but I don't remember what had happened, but we were like in the middle of nowhere and he had like gotten mad at me and he like slammed the car in park really fast. And then he, was screaming and yelling at me in the car, which was not uncommon. That was like a very normalized thing for us. That's probably why I have car trauma for sure. Like I get scared when people drive crazy because he used to do that all the time. He would on purpose get into car wrecks to hurt me, which was great. But yeah, he would like slam the car into park and then took the keys and walked away. Like I was scared to death and I was like, you can't leave me here, and I didn't have an extra key. And so he would do stuff like that to scare me on purpose. Like there was no physical violence yet. But as I mentioned in the last episode, like abuse is very colorful and there's many different forms of abuse. And so a lot of times people are like, well, he didn't put his hands on me. Yeah, but there's 100 different types of abuse. And that's, fear and control, power and control is a huge underrated form of abuse that nobody likes to talk about. So I knew that he was already he was already starting, like turning back into his real self. It was already starting. And then when things got legit physical, I was like, we're done. I've had enough, like trespassed him. And of course, at first he didn't listen. He would like show up in the middle of the night and knock on my door and it would scare me. I'd have to call him in, and he would take off before the cops got there. And It was crazy. So just allowing him back in my life for a short period of time, I had to deal with the consequences of that for like 6 months until he got over, he got over that again and then went back out and started using. And at that period of time, he was gone for a long time. He was gone for a long time after that. I don't think he came back until another year or a year and a half later. I was living in a different place. And it was the same thing. Like, he had a girlfriend at the time, but he wanted his family back and he was clean and sober. And that was his pattern. You know what I mean? That was his pattern. He had done that forever. And then in winter of 2016, we were kind of co-parenting at that time, because I remember my lawyer had told me that he still gets his court ordered parenting time. Like, he gets his however many hours a month, and I have to give him that, or that's contempt of court regardless, unless he threatens harm or does harm us within a 90-day period, then I have to let him have that, which is insane to me because of the state that I live in, but whatever. And so we were kind of co-parenting back then. Things were okay. Like, they weren't perfect by any means, but they weren't abusive. But I remember, like, it was either Christmas Day or the day after Christmas, and I had I woke up and I was still drunk or something like that, and I was like getting my daughter ready because she was going to go spend a couple hours with him and his family for Christmas. And my aunt, who she suffers with some mental health issues, she was like having an episode that morning. Like, she was just, going off and yelling at everybody and all the things. And I, in my brain, heard that she said something like she was going to hurt my daughter or something, because I was still drunk. So it's kind of cloudy for me. But I remember, like, I physically fought her. Like, I lost my mind and physically fought my aunt. I've never in my life done that. And I remember my brother, like, he was sleeping on the floor in the living room, and because it happened in the living room, like, I started just beating her up in the living room, and my brother woke up and shot up from the floor and like grabbed me and pulled me off of her, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like, he was shocked, and of course my aunt was like scared for her life, and my gram got them out of there, like her, my gram got my aunt and her out of there, and I kind of calmed down, and I was just completely ashamed and shocked. Like, I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? And for me, that was a huge wake-up call. And I remember Christmas Day 2016, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't, I remember like looking at myself in the mirror and just completely hating myself. Like, I got to a point again, where I was like, I just hated myself. I had no idea who I was. I hated who I had become. I hated the partying. I hated the things that I was doing. I just hated myself. I hated all of it, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I remember after that, it was kind of a slow process, but I remember after that, I had moved to a different location I agreed to live with my mom for a little while. So we were roommates. And I was like, I'm getting sober. I'm not doing this anymore. I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And that's kind of what happened. I stopped drinking liquor, stopped drinking beer. I think for a while, like into 2017, I drank a little bit of wine and stuff, and then completely cut off everyone from that life. Completely stopped talking to everyone from that party life, cut everybody off, and I was just alone. Like, I remember I was just completely alone. Like, I didn't have time for anybody or any of the nonsense. Like, I had to get away. I had to be free from that, and I had to figure out who the hell that I was. Well, in the course of moving on and trying to find myself and just like slowing down from the party life, I was able to kind of face the fire and rediscover a little bit of myself, which sucked. It was hard, and I think that that's fair, but I don't know. I feel like my whole point of this episode is that, like, as mentioned, is that shame just comes like attached with abuse and addiction and loss of self-identity. We put ourselves in positions and we do things that are just embarrassing or they're shameful and we wish that we could take them back and we can't. But we can't live there either. We can't live in past mistakes. And like I mentioned in my last video, like I'm not the same woman I was 5 years ago. I'm not the woman I was a year ago, not the woman I was 3 months ago. Like we're not those people anymore. And there's no point for us to stay there, to stay and just kind of sit and stew in the mistakes that we've made, because everyone's made mistakes. And if anyone tells you they've had a perfect walk at life and they've never done things that they wish they could take back or that was embarrassing, they're a liar. They're lying to you. That's not true. We're human beings. We were born in sin. Like we literally make stupid choices. Like that's just life, and so 2017 was pretty rough. It was full of like regret and shame. And I was just so embarrassed by who I was and the things that I had done. I just wanted to kind of curl up and hide and never talk to another person ever again in my life. So, yeah. So one of my points on here says pathways through the chaos, which is kind of what we've been talking about. But, it's just kind of what helps you move on past that phase. And mine, like I just mentioned, was a traumatic experience. Like when I had hurt my aunt, which is something I would never do, was a huge wake-up call to me that I made a mistake, that this has gotten pushed out too far, that I can't do this anymore. And then of course, like community, like I mentioned in the last video, is really important. Like right here it says research suggests that ongoing peer support, community involvement, and identity building and redefining recovery is a key for long-term stability. And again, like as mentioned in the last episode, I'm not so good with community. Even now, being a woman, like I'm a pretty antisocial person. I feel like the world has kind of taught me to be callous a little bit and kind of closed off. So I'm not huge with people, which is funny, I know, because I'm in the medical field, but like those are my people. But I am not a people person at all. I'm pretty antisocial, and I have my tribe of people, and I think that that's all that I want. But I do have, like my faith. And so just kind of being alone was really important for me, and getting reconnected with my faith. And like I said, like the baby steps to a better life was really key. My biggest takeaway from today's episode is that this is a messy stage, that really anyone that comes out of abuse or addiction or loss of self you're going to go through it. It's a part of our healing. It's just another obstacle that we have to go through, but we're not our mistakes. We're not the shame. We're not the things that we wish we could take back. We're beautiful people who have been hurt, and we're all worthy of love. Even after all of our stupid choices that we've made, we're worthy of love. And yeah, I put a little note on here where it's okay. It's okay that those things happen to you. It's okay that you made those stupid mistakes. You're not defined by them. You're not defined by the choices that you made or the things that have happened to you. And just because we were lost in that period of our life and we didn't know who we were, that does not by any means mean we're lost forever. And if this is something that you're currently going through right now, there's nothing wrong with you. I remember I would tell myself that all the time, like, wow, I'm messed up. There's something seriously wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. There wasn't anything wrong with me. I had grown up in abuse and I lived in abuse. I just got out of an abusive relationship where I was told all these terrible, horrible things. I lost my self-identity and I was trying to rebuild something from nothing. And I didn't know who I was. And I was my biggest, and I still am, and my biggest bully, I guess. I'm the biggest bully on myself. And it's just really important for everyone to know that just because we're lost in a moment in time does not mean we're lost forever. And it doesn't mean that we can't change. It's never too late to fix your life. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to, pick yourself back up. And Yeah, like as mentioned in the last episode, mistakes happen, obstacles happen, you know, bad choices happen, going back happens, relapse happens. Like almost every single person that I have talked to that has gotten off of a hardcore drug has switched drugs, has switched to something else. Like if it's not alcohol, it's work. If it's not work, it's sex. If it's not sex, it's working out. It's something. You're always trading your addiction for another addiction. And the thing that we need to learn as addicts is that we're addicts. Just because we're not addicted to those things doesn't mean that we can't totally take it out of control, which is what happened with me. Was that no, by any means, I was not an alcoholic in any way, shape, or form. I would go long periods of time without drinking, but when I drank. Like I didn't have a limit. I wouldn't stop when I should. I didn't have the ability to just, oh, that's enough. I've had enough. No, I would drink and I'd black out and then I would be an idiot. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of the way it is. Like I realize the older I get that I will always be an addict. I will always be an addict. I always have to remind myself that too much of anything can be a bad thing, and I can turn anything into an unhealthy addiction. Literally anything. I've done it with working out. I've done it with health and fitness. Like as mentioned before, like I have body dysmorphia. I have literally taken something that's healthy and positive and turned it into a completely unhealthy and unpositive thing. I have broken my own ribs because I was malnourished after getting sober from alcohol. I was like so hyperfixated on, working out and feeling good and making right choices that I wasn't providing myself enough nutrients that I sat up in the morning to wake up for work and my ribs popped out of my body. You know what I mean? And when I got x-rays, like this side of my ribs was like snapped. They literally, like the doctors literally thought that I was being abused, and I like had to assure them that I wasn't being abused anymore, that I literally sat up. I had like made my bones so brittle from just lack of nutrients that it took me a while to bring myself back. And then that was another example of me being like, man, we really can just screw ourselves up, and we really can just turn anything into an addiction if you know what I mean, if given the opportunity to do that. So I think just having self-awareness and realizing that this is a part of it, like the chaos after freedom is a part of it, the rebellious stage is a part of it, relapse and switching drugs is a part of it, and it doesn't mean you're going to stay there forever. It just means that it's another obstacle that we have to work through. Yeah. So that's just kind of where I'm at for the episode, and I feel like I'm at a good place to stop. I just wanted to really like have this be the next one because it's really important. And then, we can go deeper, for our next episode, kind of more about like what happens. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me today, to talk about this kind of stuff. Obviously it's heavy. I feel like everything we talk about is pretty heavy, but thanks for sticking it out with me. Again, thank you for all of your guys' support. If you want to dig deeper and talk a little bit more about this, feel free to leave me a message, or a comment if you don't mind if it's public. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys for hearing me and wanting to hear me, hear me speak again. Like I'm not anything special. I'm just a woman who's been through some stuff, and I just want to use my story to help others. And I hope it is helping you guys. I do. And I hope that you hear something and you're like, yeah, finally another person can understand what I'm going through or what I did go through, and because, we live in a cold world where it does feel like, you're going through things and people really just don't give a shit about you. And I do. I care. I care about people, even though I don't like people very much. I know that's weird, but I do care about people, and I care about advocating for them, and I care about healing. And it's important for me as a person to know that I'm not going to be like this forever. I'm not going to be broken forever, and I'm not defined by my abuse or my addictions or the mistakes that I've made. I'm forever changing and forever healing, and we're enough, and we'll always be enough, and we're never not worth saving, and we're never too lost to find our way back, to find the light. And just know that I see you, and you're enough, and it's going to be okay. I'll see you next week.